Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry we're in of writing and self-publishing. And once again, we've branched a little beyond self-publishing today with a returning guest, Dr. Roger Leslie, who is a real renaissance man. And not only are you a writer yourself and a publisher, you also help inspire other people and help equip other people with what they need to get their own books in print. So it's a delight to have you back. How are you doing, Roger?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Oh, well, it is a great pleasure to have you back here. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland. And thanks again for coming back, Roger. We had you, it was a while back. I don't remember when it was. I know it was episode 74. I looked that up. But we had, at that time we were talking about choosing the path between, self-publishing, traditional publishing, the hybrid model. And, you as a publisher and editor and all those other things that you do, jack of all trades, you have a lot of insight into that. But today, we wanted to talk about review journals, reviewing. I mean, that's one of the things that Hidden Gems is known for, is reviewing. But what we mainly focus on is, getting authors' reviews on Amazon and soon on some of the other sites. But there's this whole other sort of world of reviews out there that isn't quite the same. The model doesn't work quite the same way. Review journals like Booklist and Library Journal and the School Library Journal and all that stuff. So I wanted you to come on and sort of talk about those things and what they are and what the use for them is for authors and why they should care about them and what it would do for them. So why don't you start off by sort of talking a little bit about what those things are, and then we can sort of get into the other stuff.
Great. So if any of your audience members are new authors, or they're just starting out, or they're doing self-publishing, then getting Amazon reviews can be wonderful. I had an author not long ago email me, and he said, well, how about if we just start swapping reviews with each other? I'll review your books, you review my books as they come out. And, although I was flattered that he asked me, there's a stage at which you move beyond just those kinds of reviews that anybody can do and move to the professional review journals, which I'll be talking about today. Now, there are other review sources, like there are many bloggers who now will review books. And a great thing about those bloggers is that they usually have a big following, and they must be book lovers or they wouldn't volunteer to be book reviewers. But again, they don't necessarily have the same credibility in the book industry as some of these resources like Booklist and Library Journal. And so I learned about these early in my writing career when I was a librarian myself. We took whole classes on reviewing and review journals and what to look for. And so mostly I wanted to share with your listeners today some of the things they can learn and that might be helpful about trying to get into these major review journals, which make all the difference for the credibility. It's sort of like the difference between a relative or a friend seeing a movie and recommending it versus a legitimate national or state or city newspaper reviewing it by someone who is a professional reviewer. So that's the key. It's just like there's specific criteria that these resources are looking for, that rather than just saying, yes, it was entertaining or I loved this book, they know exactly what they're looking for, and they know the quality that should be just incorporated into any good fiction or nonfiction book.
Well, yes, and that's an interesting point, because there's a lot of people, I think, that sort of trust the reviews from their friends more than they would trust the review from a professional reviewer, because they sort of know what their friend likes. They know what their the person that is reviewing it likes, whereas sometimes those big ones, they you might know what that person likes too, because if you read a lot of their reviews, you see, oh, this reviewer specifically likes this kind of movie, doesn't like this kind of movie, and often they only like, movies that are like these big popcorn movies that are big adventures. They don't usually like them, right? Whereas the common person loves them, right? So it's an interesting that's an interesting difference, I think, because, and then there's also sort of that idea, and now this would apply, I think, to both like the reviews on Amazon or these professionals, and maybe it's less so for the professionals, but some people sort of don't trust the reviews. They think that they're paid for or whatever, and so you see that on online on Amazon, people think, oh yeah, those are a bunch of fake reviews. But you might also feel that way from a professional reviewer, thinking, oh, they're probably, even if it's not overtly, they might be sending them to a movie premiere to get them to do a great thing. Now, with a book, it's probably different, right? It's only so much you can do, sending them a free copy of the book. But, they might wonder, oh, if this person gave a bad review to this book, would that publisher stop sending their reviews over there? So I'm wondering sort of like your thoughts on sort of that side of it, just because you sort of gave that dichotomy between this kind of review and that kind of review, and I'm just wondering about what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I surely can appreciate where you're coming from, because I know I've been a movie fan all my life, and I've written some movie reference books and everything that have been published and done very well. And I know for myself, there are certain reviewers that I almost always disagree with them. Even, like this is in some like national magazines. It's like, if this reviewer does not like the movie, I will probably love it. And if they think it's too schmaltzy or too overly sentimental or whatever, I think, okay, that's the movie I need to see. So I do appreciate the fact that you may not agree with the reviewers, but the difference is these professional reviewers are looking for specific criteria that you must meet for book excellence that the average reader might not know. An average reader is just like, well, do I like it or do I not? What about it did I connect with? What did I not? And that can be very helpful for, someone who's browsing through Amazon, is looking for a new read or just searching for a new author. But for example, if you're a librarian, there are certain criteria that books must meet in order to justify a purchase. I was a school librarian for 16 years, and every purchase that I made for my library, I had to justify. So because I would send my book list that I purchased that year to my principal, and then that principal in turn would send it to the administration building. And if there was any question about, well, why would you order this book? There are certain criteria that I knew professionally I had to meet in order for a book to justify getting in the library. And that's theoretically the value of having a professional reviewer review your book. They're supposed to know literature. They're supposed to know what is out there in nonfiction already, because in fiction, your ideal scenario is that you are offering a new voice that has not been heard exactly the same way before. And in nonfiction, ideally, you're adding something new to the body of knowledge about a particular subject. So if you've written a book and your reviewer knows that subject area very well, they might say, well, what has Roger Leslie added with this book that so-and-so didn't already share 2 years ago in his or her book, whatever. That's theoretically their background. They're supposed to know. And also, just as there are certain hurdles you have to cross through to be traditionally published, there are certain hurdles you need to pass through to get reviewed in these major journals. It's not like just one person is receiving your book and saying, oh, I don't like it, I'm not going to review it. It goes to a committee, and that committee looks and says, is this is the quality of the writing strong enough? Is the quality of the production of the book strong enough? And if it is, then who among my staff is the best person to review this book? I was a Booklist reviewer for 9 years, from like 1998 till about 2007. And I only gave up the job because I went for my PhD, and I realized I needed to give up one of my side jobs because there was just too much going on for me to work in a doctoral program. So that's why I gave up my job at Booklist. But there was an editor that I had to answer to, and she was the one who received the books. She would send me books that she thought I would be a good fit for because I was a high school librarian, in Texas. So she knew my background. She knew my areas of expertise. And then she would send me the books that she thought I would be best suited to review. And then it was my job to review it for librarians. Booklist is a publication of the American Library Association. So it is a review source for librarians to determine, is this the kind of resource I should add to my library? And if so, why? So there
I was just going to say, it sounds like there's different levels then of the criteria, right? Because if your, let's say your boss is getting it to determine who on her team should do the review, she's probably not reading all those books. She's just doing a cursory glance through to see certain things. I'm guessing, is it like a good professional looking cover? Are there, professionally edited? Is it this and that, right? Or what else is she looking for before she even passes it on to someone like you?
So other things, does she know the publishing house? Is it a familiar publishing house? Are they known for quality production of their books? She may look at the website and see how many books that publishing house already has out. Now, even these major review journals are reviewing self-published books. There are just other criteria that you must meet for them to be under consideration. But it's very much like the difference between, as we talked about in my last interview, the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing, and even hybrid publishing. With traditional publishing, you submit your manuscript to a publishing house. There is a first reader who looks at the book and thinks, okay, this might be a good fit for our publishing house. So they pass it on to the acquisitions editor. The acquisitions editor thinks, okay, yes, this might be a good fit for us. And then you often take it to a committee and say, is this something we want? If we're only publishing 6 books this year, is this one of them that we want to consider? And they look at other criteria like, do we have other books on this topic already out there? Is it very different from the one we did in the past? So there are certain hurdles that you have to pass through in order to get traditionally published, it's why traditional publication still holds a level of credibility that in some cases self-publishing doesn't. Because in self-publishing, you really can write a book. Ideally, and I encourage all authors to do this, once you've written your book, send it to a professional editor. Get it professionally edited. Editing is not proofreading. Editing, they'll do a developmental edit and then they'll do a line edit. Those are two different skills, but have the book professionally edited. But theoretically, after that, if you want to self-publish your book, you just find someone who can create the cover. You find the company that can do the interior design and then print it, not knowing, are there other books out there like that? Is the quality of this book, does it match what the market is looking for, what readers deserve? And sometimes that's important. Sometimes, if you just want to say you have a book published, or if you want to use it as a calling card to do speaking engagements for your business, well, you might not necessarily need to have like a top A+ grade quality book. But if that's what you're looking for and you want a career as a respected author, then being able to meet that criteria with people in the industry can only empower you as you develop and as your career grows.
Right.
There's a certain amount of credit. I think there are almost like 2 circles when it comes to selling books, aren't there? There are books, that people, if they're romance books, people look at the one on Amazon and place a lot of weight into the user-generated reviews. Whereas other books, there is a certain cachet in having a review that's published in a magazine or a review that's published. It opens it up and gives the book, rightfully or not, a certain amount of credibility, instant credibility that I think, can work definitely in its favor. And it's almost like it has to meet the user reader promise that not all self-published books do. It's like if you're going to get a magazine to write about it, even if the book isn't that entertaining, it's going to be a properly edited, properly formatted, properly put together book. So there's a certain level of quality that has to be reached.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And both of those different realms can work for each other. for example, when you think of movies, there are some movies that are just brilliantly reviewed. There are critics who just love it, but it never does well at the box office. It just doesn't catch on through word of mouth or to the moviegoers. Then there are others where that, the reviewers pan the movie, but there's something about it that the public just loves, and it becomes such a box office smash that over time the reviewers kind of soften their dislike for it. It's like, all right, let me look at this again. Maybe there's something that people are connecting with that I didn't see. And true, maybe the quality of the writing is not up to the standard of like a Citizen Kane or a Casablanca, but there is a level of appeal to it, especially now that we're nearing the holidays. There's always this argument about why don't critics like Christmas movies? They think they're too schmaltzy, they're too sentimental. It's just like they're too forthright in their sentimentality. Well, around the holidays, that's exactly what audiences want. And so the same is true for the book industry. You get reviewed by these journals, and if they like it, then it's likely to help the sale of the books because you can use that in your promotional materials. And vice versa, if your book starts selling really well, that's when traditional publishers and reviewers start taking another look and think, well, there must be something to this because look how it's taking off.
Right. And okay, so for the major ones, so I guess it's Booklist and the Library Journal, School Library Journal. So obviously those library ones are going to the library and the school library. Booklist, is that going out to the major book chains to determine what books to carry, or how is that one used?
Well, it is also used for libraries because it is published by the American Library Association, and it's been around for more than 100 years. And here's what they base their criteria on. There's an article for librarians that came out long ago that says not censorship, but selection. The selector, and in this case then the reviewer, begins ideally with a presumption in favor of liberty of thought. The censor does not. The aim of the selector is to promote reading, not to inhibit it, to multiply the points of view which will find expression, not limit them, to be a channel for communication, not a bar against it. So what reviewers for Booklist and other professional journals, they're looking for new voices. They're looking for, what are you saying about this topic that is adding something of value to libraries and people reading in general? There are 3 criteria for becoming, that are the cornerstone of what a librarian must do. We focus on access to information, a balanced collection, and a current collection. So, for example, access to information. As a librarian, my job was to give my patrons access to information about topics that they're interested in or that are of value to our society at this time. Not to say, okay, this is nice, I agree morally with this, or this is wrong, I shouldn't put this in a school, but it's giving them access to information. So the idea then is to cover what is of interest and what is of value to our culture. And similarly, a balanced collection means that if I'm going to buy a series of books on presidents, I need to have presidents who are both Republican and Democrat. I can't just buy a bunch of just the ones that I particularly agree with because I think, oh, kids need to learn this side of the issue. You give a balanced collection so that readers can decide for themselves. They can read one person's perspective, another person's perspective, and form their own educated opinion about how they feel about things. And then another thing that's important is that librarians are expected to keep their collection current. So, a lot of these review journals will review books that are published the current year, but not much longer than that. There are a few, like Publishers Weekly, who will go a little farther than that. And there have even been some that will go within a 5-year span. But except for fiction, because fiction theoretically doesn't age, and there are certain topics like self-help, you can have older books in self-help, but in a collection, like if a science book is 5 years old, I, as the librarian, need to be reviewing, that is looking over that book to see, is everything still current information in there? I mean, suddenly Pluto wasn't a planet and I had just ordered all these astronomy books. It's like, okay, all these books are now outdated because they're listing Pluto as a planet, and the scientists have decided it is not.
I don't care what the scientists say. Pluto is still a planet to me.
So the idea then is that these review journals are helping what is of value to librarians. What do we need to have a balanced collection and a current collection, and to give patrons access to all kinds of information, not just the things that we think are important.
What's the difference between Booklist and the library journal then? If Booklist is also used by libraries, why have both, I guess?
Well, I can speak only for myself as a librarian. Booklist to me was the Bible of review journals. The best thing about Booklist is they only positively review books. They do not give a bad review. In all the years that I worked for Booklist, there are only 2 books that I did not review because I didn't think the quality of the book was strong enough. One, the writing was just poor. And the other one, it was meant for a lower elementary age reader, and its depiction of violence and its encouragement of you resolve a conflict in the Old West just by using a gun and blowing somebody away just didn't sit right with me. And so even if we rejected a book in Booklist, I had to write up a justification to my editor to explain, I'm not reviewing this book and this is why, because the publisher has a right to know. And if you've written or published a book and Booklist decides not to publish a review of it, that you have they will give you an explanation of why they chose not to. So the difference, one of the main differences between Booklist and library journal and school library journal is Booklist only reviews positively. So if you have a review in Booklist, when I was ordering books from catalogs, if it just had a little BL underneath it, that means it was reviewed in Booklist. I knew I could trust that to buy that book from my library. If it said SLJ, School Library Journal, or LJ, I needed to read that review to make sure it was a positive review, because sometimes they review books that they do not recommend.
Okay, so to be clear, when you say that they only give positive reviews, that doesn't mean that they'll give a positive review of a book they don't like. That just means that if they don't like the book, it won't be included.
It will not be. They will not review it. They will not put it in their journal.
And then, but you're obviously not doing this on every book in the world. It's only books, I guess, that are submitted to Booklist.
Yes. And they do have very specific criteria. You can go to their websites and know. Here's something that many authors and some publishers aren't aware of. Like, Booklist wants their galley proof, the galley proof of your book, 15 weeks before publication date. Because ideally, they want their review published at the same time your book is coming out. So if you're planning for a June publication for something, then 15 or more weeks before then, you need to get them your galley proof. And that can be a hard copy. It can be, a digital copy. They list on their website all the different forms that they take it. And the nice thing about a galley proof is if you write galley proof or reader's proof on it, you can still make minor changes up to the very end. It's not like you're locked in and you can't change anything, but what you're doing is giving them 98% of exactly what you expect to come out in print, but they want it to be published concurrently. Another thing that you can consider as an author is if you don't have a specific reason why you want to publish on a certain month, then you might choose to publish on a month, so that your book comes out on a month where Booklist features that particular topic. For example, once a month, they may do an LGBTQ tribute issue where most of the books are about LGBTQ characters or nonfiction. They might have a Women's History Month where they dedicate most of their major reviews to women's history books. They could have science fiction and fantasy, whereas maybe in September, it's their science fiction fantasy issue. So if you don't have any other criteria for why you would want to release a book at a certain time, then having it featured in Booklist on their special feature tribute issue, and having that in that issue rather than just having a science fiction book come out in any review issue could be helpful. It could be really helpful for sales, because if librarians are looking for new sci-fi books and your review is featured in there, they would notice it right away. They know to expect, oh, on that month, this is their specialty. This is the focus for the topic.
So is it once a month that that these are published?
When I was reviewing for it, it came out every 2 weeks. But I do think they have monthly issues. And I did look up, because I haven't worked for them for quite a while. So I did look up, did some research before this interview, and they are still publishing the print version as well as an online version. They have more reviews in the online version, and they have like subsets. You know how publishers now, they will have, their own imprint, and then they'll have like a self-publishing imprint where if you self-publish through them and it sells well enough, then they'll put it in, then they'll acquire the book in their publishing house. These review journals, some of the review journals are similar in that they have like their regular reviews that go out in print and online, but then they have like another portal that you can get into online where you can be reviewed. Like if you're just self-publishing books, they might just have a portal just for self-published books. So people realize, oh, okay, this is not necessarily from a legitimate publishing house. This is a new self-published book. Some of those, not Booklist, but some of those, I believe like School Library Journal, one of those portals is a pay service where you could pay to get a review if you wanted to. Now, this is just my personal opinion. To me, paid reviews have no value. And if you're paying somebody, of course, they're going to find all the best things they can say about it and say it. But not everybody agrees. Kirkus had, years ago, Kirkus went to pay reviews. Kirkus, from a librarian standpoint, Kirkus was always kind of if I couldn't find reviews in anything else, but I needed some reviews to justify the purchase for something I needed in my library, if Kirkus gave it a really positive review back before they were before you pay for reviews, then I could use that as a somewhat of a justification. But if you're just starting out and you want to pay for reviews, that might be helpful because, having Kirkus review your book as opposed to Joanne Rodriguez down the street, there's a certain level of credibility that, okay, there's at least a company that's known for book reviewing that has looked at your book and has something positive to say about it. But again, that's just my opinion. I would steer away from pay review resources because it just seems to be loaded with, well, they've got to say something nice because you're paying them.
Well, that was going to be my question. Like, I don't know that I've ever read a Kirkus review quote that was negative, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. That just means that, somebody's not going to include it in their list
right.
of, yeah. But that is my question though. Like, do you know if an author goes and pays Kirkus to review their book, is there a chance Kirkus will give it a negative review, or is it pretty much always positive?
I can't speak to that specifically. I don't know, but I would think if you work for Kirkus, then you would still be ethically committed to giving a fair review. So part of a fair review is finding what's positive. And if there's some concerns about what's missing in this book or what they didn't cover or questions you still had after you read it, that should be addressed in the review. So I would think that they would lean toward being positive, but I would think as professionals, they would know, yes, I really need to mention, this book is good, but it's really not covering any new territory on the subject, or the quality of the writing could be amped up a little bit, or they didn't think of some really obvious things that readers might want to know if they're going to read about this topic. That seems like it would be a logical thing for any reviewer to do.
Right. Okay, so if an author wanted to get reviewed, let's say a self-published author, right? Because if you are published, if you go through a publishing company, I imagine they would do a lot of the work on that. But if you were a self-published author and you wanted some of the benefits that you've talked about, you want to be, have libraries consider your book and, get more exposure to it, how would they go about getting it reviewed by one of these?
So there are specific review criteria on all these places' websites, and they tell you exactly what to do. These review journals are just like a new employer or if an application to college. They're looking to see, do you pay attention? Do you follow the rules? That's a red flag. if they tell you send this and this and this in this format and you don't, then that's, that automatically tells them, okay, this person either is not serious about his or her career, or they just don't know how to follow directions, or they don't understand what we're asking for. So the most important thing is just follow the criteria exactly. If they say they need something in 15 weeks or more before the publication date, then don't wait till 12 weeks before and send it and say, oh, this is my, our projected publication date is such and such, because they'll see, oh, that's only 3 months away. It's too late. Didn't they read the directions? So it'll give them step-by-step directions. Also, if you have a solid press kit, that is, your author headshot, information about you and your career, and about the author page already established and set up. And, I write several different topics. I write spiritual books, I write fiction, I write movie reference books. So I have a different about the author for every one of those, because each audience will want something a little bit different from me. So include the one that fits the book that you're sending in, and have that press kit ready. If you have other reviews, if you have other sales data that you can add, anything that you can put in your press kit. And if you have a publicist, your publicist will know what to do and what to put in there. And, it's having a publicist can also be helpful, because it's kind of like having an agent. If you're going through traditional publishers, there are some publishing companies that don't want to hear from you unless you have an agent. So, if you're going traditional publishing, it's smart to get an agent in most cases, because they are connected to the industry and they can get your foot in the door to get published. The same thing is true for review journals. If you have a publicist and they know there's a contact person that they can talk to and get information from your packet, rather than just you're an author sitting here by yourself trying to do everything by yourself. And I know that's the case for many, many authors, because I was a one-man band for years. Even though I was getting traditionally published in certain categories, in other categories I was self-publishing those books, and I was just doing everything. I was in charge of all of it, and it's exciting for a while, but then it becomes overwhelming, and it takes time away from writing, which, if you're anything like me, you want to spend most of your time writing.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of. Oh, sorry, Roland, you're on mute, I think, or I didn't hear you at least.
Oh, all I said was absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? So we've both experienced the problem of, like, your writing business ends up being so much business that you can't do the writing.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And but I think that there's still a lot of authors out there that they don't have publicists, they don't have publishers, they don't have press kits. I mean, you could put together your own press kit, but they don't even know where to start on that. So there are websites that I guess give the step-by-step of what you need to do, where you need to send, what the deadlines are, all that stuff. And then if you follow all that, what happens then? Do they still decide whether they're going to review, or do they take every submission?
The major ones, like Booklist, Library Journal, School Library Journal, they can be selective. They don't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily guarantee you'll get a review, but the bloggers will usually do that. If you want to send it to a blogger, they say, I'm reviewing books on such and such a topic, and you write that, send it to the blogger. They'll have a following. That's really good to get your name out. Just the more places you get your name out, and the more you're connected to people who are influencers in the industry, it's all a great thing. And for those,
for sure,
those authors who are new and just listening, early on, there's a huge high learning curve to this industry. So I recommend you just kind of take it in as you can. Don't feel like you have to have a press kit right now, or don't feel like, oh, I've got to have new author photos taken right now, but just kind of tuck it into the back of your mind. It's like, okay, a press kit is a good thing to have when I'm ready to do that. But the most important thing is you need to have a quality book to put in the marketplace. So focus on the writing, make sure it is as excellent as you can make it. And then when you start putting it out there, whether it's through self-publication or through traditional publishing, one thing you need to know is who else is writing in your genre. How is your book like other people who are doing well in your genre? And then what makes your voice unique?
Right. Now, you had mentioned earlier like one of the criteria they look at is the publisher, right? So if this is a publisher that's known for quality books, et cetera, right? But then there's the self-publisher, and you'd said something about there might be other criteria they look at if you're a self-publisher. So if you're a self-publisher, what is some of the specific, sort of self-publishing criteria that they might look at? My guess would be they're probably going to lean more towards somebody who has multiple books rather than this is my first self-published book. But, I don't know. That's just my guess. So do you have any idea of what sort of specific self-publishing criteria they might look at?
So I could tell you the criteria that I look at when I look at a self-published book. One thing that is glaringly obvious, if you're using cheap white paper and really, and just, an unattractive interior design, you're not really up to the standards of the industry. I also look at the verso of the title page. What kind of information is on the back there? For example, one thing that's a great thing to add to the verso of your title page is the CIP, which is cataloging and publication. That is the information on if a librarian was going to put that in his or her library, that's the cataloging information. They could just put it in their system. It's just like, okay, this book, these are the topics this is about. This is about, U.S. history, Civil War, African-American perspective. This is about so-and-so, this is about this particular person. It gives the Dewey number, the Dewey Decimal number, or the library catalog number, and it gives the topics that you would look under to find that if someone's going to be looking for a book on that topic, and it gives a one sentence summary. What is this book about? So a CIP at the back of the verso page is huge to me as a former librarian. Another thing, for nonfiction books, include an index. If that's one of the criteria for getting a nonfiction book in a library. If the book is not indexed, then my students couldn't use it for research. They're not going to read if they're doing like a report on atoms or molecules, they're not going to read the whole book for a single report. But if they go to the index and say, oh, okay, look, what pages are the hydrogen atom on? I can go to pages 43 and 44. That's what I'm looking for. I'm writing a paper about the hydrogen atom, something like that. So you need a really solid resource will have an index. Little tips like that make a huge difference on the quality of the book. Again, you're trying to make your book as user-friendly as you can. If you're writing fiction, a good thing to do, especially if you're writing for young adults, is add some thought, for further thinking questions at the end of the novel, or, for book groups questions, questions for conversations, so that you can highlight anything you symbolize or any unique things about characterization. Just give them a few discussion questions or questions for thought after the text of your fiction. So it's more than just, okay, I set the book down, I liked it or I didn't. It's like, wow, I could have a discussion with somebody about this, or I can think about these questions, or I didn't even notice that they put that in this book. I didn't realize there was a symbolic meaning to this person's name, but now I see the connection because the author has pointed it out to me. Those little additions show that you really have the reader in mind. If you know your reader well and you know your topic well, you'll put in there what you know that they need in order to understand and fully appreciate everything that you've put into your book.
That's some good advice, I think. These things, again, are mainly for libraries, but are there any sort of equivalent ones for, like, what do bookstores look at when they're deciding about taking books? Do they look at this stuff too, or is it something else that they look at?
I think they would look at many of the same criteria. They're looking for, is this a quality resource? And one of the most important things that an author can do, especially a self-published author, is look at what other books have been published on your topic within the last 5 years, and then show how it's similar, and then show how it's different. A simple example, I'm a writing coach, and I coached one gentleman through writing some legal thrillers. And he said, well, this is a John Grisham style book. I was just like, okay, so I know where it would go, and the cover designer would know how to design it to make it clear that this is a legal thriller and everything. But John Grisham's done pretty well with his own books. How is yours different from a John Grisham book. And for his, I had to help him brainstorm for a while, but he was Hispanic. He grew up in a lower socioeconomic area of Houston, and he became a really distinguished lawyer in Houston and had a penthouse office downtown. And he said that his legal thrillers had Hispanic characters, and they were for encouraging and empowering Hispanics to see the power they have in any culture, not just the American culture. I thought, well, there you go. That's what makes yours different. Yours is like John Grisham style books, but you're targeting a Hispanic readership. Now, that doesn't mean only Hispanic people will read the book, but when you market the book, you want to market to a very specific niche and hope that word catches on and other people in other areas are interested in it too.
Your USP, your unique selling point, I guess.
Yes, that's it. Yes, absolutely. Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of stuff helps too when you're thinking about how to market your book is you want to have that almost like that elevator pitch, right? You want to know what it is that makes your story a little bit different. That's going to make people be like, hey, yeah, that's something I want to read. It's a sort of similar idea, I guess.
Yes, and it's great practice, just to have a pitch ready. Even when you go to writers' conferences or anything, just have a one-sentence pitch ready. So when you say, yes, I'm writing a book, and someone says, well, what's it about? Instead of hemming and hawing, say, well, it's a mystery, and it's a murder mystery that takes place in the 1920s. There's nothing in there that intrigues anybody. There's no hook. What you want to do is you want to come up with a hook about something really intriguing that, okay, my book is about, and then say something in your elevator pitch that is like, oh, let me hear more. What do you mean? What is this about? If you can work on that, and it's fun, that's kind of a fun activity that you can work on, and it develops your skills of salespersonship.
I think it develops your skills as a writer in many ways. Like if you can come up with that, like, hey, my book is Snakes on a Plane meets Winnie the Pooh, then it's a good pitch.
Absolutely. And that's one of the fun things about being a writer. There's one kind of skill that takes to write a really great book. There's a whole other skill that's required to do the back of the book information. Like, what is it in one or two sentences that I can say about this book that's going to catch everybody's attention? And if you go through traditional publishing, the editor can help you with that, but they're still going to expect you to do that, you as the author. But if you're self-publishing, it's up to you entirely. You've got to come up with, what can I write on the back of this book that will make people, if they just turn it over and look at it, or if they're looking online and they just see the back, so what's going to make them open the book and think, well, at least I want to start reading the first paragraph, and then work on that first paragraph. What's in that first paragraph that makes people think, wow, I need to take this to the counter and buy it, or click on buy now because I'm intrigued. It's all those hooks that get people started to get them interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, we offer a blurb service for that reason as one of our more popular services, because exactly that. A lot of authors, they can write the book, but they don't have that same skill that's almost more of a marketing skill to distill that whole book down into a really catchy, really, a blurb that makes people want to read more. That oftentimes they just want to include too many details from their book and not the important key details that whet their appetite to read the whole book. And I think that is it is a very different skill, definitely.
And you make a perfect point, Craig, that ties in with our ideas about these review journals, because you as a professional and the people who work for and with you, what needs to go in there. What works and what doesn't. The same thing is true for reviewers. They know what readers are looking for. They know what information is already out there about the topics you're writing about. Ideally, they do. And so they can address that without you as the author having to try to figure it out, or just randomly, contacting 10 friends and say, would you please review my book on Amazon? There's nothing wrong with that. If that's where you are in your career, more power to you. Do whatever you know to do at this point. But as you work your way up in the industry, get connected with people who know the industry. And there is no greater advocate for a writer than a librarian. Librarians will be your champions. If you can get your book in some libraries and the librarian likes you or likes your work, they will share that information all over everywhere. That's just what librarians do. I know, having worked with them, having been one, books are their passion, even if they don't write. And if they don't write, but they're avid readers, they make sure they want to get that book into as many other people's hands as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, oh, well, unfortunately, we are approaching the top of the hour, so we're going to have to cut this short, Roger. But what a really interesting discussion. I think I've definitely like taken on board a lot. My perspectives on reviews have been broadened a bit by that. I can always see there's like some cachet to having a review that's not like user generated, but I can see now there are other doors that it opens up for you that might be useful as an author.
I'm glad you feel that way, Roland. And as I said earlier, if you're listening to this interview, wherever you are in your writing career, take what you can and just kind of tuck the rest back into the back of your mind and think, okay, that's something that might be useful to know at some point. It's easy to get overwhelmed in this industry, especially if you're self-publishing, because you're juggling everything yourself all the time, and it's all time consuming, and then it becomes expensive. So if there's anything that I've shared that really resonates with you, move in that direction, go with that thought, and just realize that there are other things that I share that someday you might want to tackle, and someday you may hire somebody who knows how to do that and will do that for you just fine, so you will never have to learn it.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap things up, Craig, do you have any final thoughts?
I just think that was really great advice, that you gave there at the end. And in general, I think this is something that a lot of authors had no knowledge of whatsoever, and it's really good to hear about the ways that they can move towards getting their books into libraries and into more hands than just popping it up on Amazon and, creating a version that's only for sale on Amazon. Like, there's a lot more they can do with it. And for authors that are looking to really expand their reach, this is something for them to look into. So I'm glad we were able to sort of distill all that information down for them. So thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure. I had a great time. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Roland.
And Dr. Roger, before we go, where can people find your work, find your website, find out where to get in, to find out more about you?
My website is my name, rogerleslie.com. Everything's there about my books, my writing, my coaching, my publishing house, and my editing services.
Brilliant. Well, we'll pop a link to that down below. And if you go down there to check that out, while you're there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. So until then, thank you very much. Bye-bye.